Good afternoon and aloha. On behalf of the Daniel K. Inouye Institute, welcome to our inaugural webinar as a part of our new series, Hana and Policy. Some of you may have remembered we were doing live talk story sessions with Zakalo Public Square in Kaka'ako. Now we have gone totally virtual and are happy to be partnering with the University of Hawaii Center on Public Policy. Our mascot is the same, which is our Zippy's booth. And we have that as a reminder of the senator's favorite place ever to eat when he was in Hawaii. And also as a reminder that there are times when you just need to sit across the table from one another, put it all out there, and just talk a little story. Although I chuckle to think what he would be thinking in this all virtual world. He probably would have some thought about always wanting to be on Hollywood Squares, which is how we are looking these days. We are thrilled with some terrific guests as again, we roll out our inaugural series with the topic being Elections 2020 and how we are all gonna roll in the new normal. It is now my pleasure to hand it over to our moderator, our favorite Donalyn Dela Cruz.
Aloha, thank you, Jen. You know, when you said that, I was just thinking, I think the last time I saw you was at Zippy's, sitting across from each other so we could kuka a little bit. And it was a great conversation then, but today is gonna be an amazing conversation. Glad to see Governor Neil Abercrombie, Mayor Billy Kenoi, and Colin Moore, who always has just kind of the insight of political happenings here in Hawaii. So thank you. I'm gonna jump right into it. You know, today, I think the latest, I just checked, in Hawaii, we have 926 cases of COVID-19. This pandemic has flipped everything, flipped the script for politics as well. So, Governor, I'm gonna start with you. How has this changed? This is a campaign season. How has this changed campaigning for all those seeking office right now?
Aloha, Donalyn. Thank you for having me today. Aloha, everybody who's out there. Billy, and what's his name? Is he somebody on KGMB occasionally, but for a comment or two? The Policy Center at the UH, I think, is filling a very, very vital need in terms of politics, in terms of understanding the context we're in. Yeah, I think it's look what we're doing right now. This may be as close as a lot of people are going to come to getting face-to-face, abstractly speaking, with politics. I think politics in terms of electoral politics. So I'll be very, very interested to see if this COVID-19 translates into a new political paradigm in terms not just of elections, but in the kinds of understanding that people have about what politics is all about.
Okay, so I think Mayor Kenoi, just a couple days ago, I was moderating the Hawaii County mayoral debate. So it's, you know, we had to do physical distancing. You couldn't even have a whole debate with everyone in there. Here in Honolulu, there was I think a PBS Hawaii mayoral debate where everyone was trying this virtual aspect of it. So Billy, how do they get their message out right now? I mean, and for the Hawaii County, that we're talking 15 candidates right now for mayor, right?
Absolutely. I tried to talk more than one candidate out of running with the understanding that, you know, hey, you sure you want to launch a campaign during a global pandemic? You know, there's so many issues that come into play affecting the very strategic nature of your campaign and how you set it up. You know, you could go down the line. You know, how are you gonna ask for money? Are you gonna raise money in a COVID environment when everybody's feeling, you know, this great economic uncertainty? And how are you gonna gather your volunteers? How are you gonna, you know, get out there and meet the voters? Because when you think about it, there's only a couple ways you can get out there and meet people. You know, one requires a lot of money, and that's where all the fundraising comes in, but it's television, newspaper, radio, and now social media, probably the cheapest form. But other than that, you know, you've got your, you know, going door to door, canvassing, coffee hours, you know, campaign rallies, campaign get-togethers, volunteer, building your base. So, you know, that campaign that you did, Donalyn, was really the first time in this entire campaign that Hawaii Island actually got to see the candidates together. So I think it's a very challenging environment, and look forward to hearing what the governor has to say, and also Professor Colin Moore, because we're all learning as we move forward.
Just on the money issue, Donalyn, just on the money issue that Billy brought up. One of the things that, and I'm sure Billy understands this very, very well. You used to be able to go to a set of people to ask for money. You could go to someone, ask for support, go to organizations and individuals and so on. Now with social media, I get hit about 25 times a day by people, not just in Hawaii, nationally, even internationally, asking for money, asking for political support. It's actually tougher in some respects, I think, to raise money now, particularly if you're a candidate just trying to get into the picture, than it might be otherwise, simply because of the diversity of the number of areas from which the requests for money are coming.
And I agree with that assessment, Governor. I mean, I think if you think about what candidates this disadvantages, this pandemic crisis, it's really new candidates, people who are not well established, who have very little recognition, because the way to do that, and I mean, this is what Mayor Kenoi was saying, you've got to go around and knock on doors. How do you do that now? And how do you convince people that you're a viable candidate? If you can't develop that kind of grassroots support, it's really hard, which means I think anyone who's trying to break in for the first time in this environment it's going to be a tough road for them.
It's not even that though, right? I mean, and Billy, I'm going to shoot this to you because you raised a lot of money over the years, right? People right now are having a hard time. So Governor, you might have gotten all of those social media aspects of things, but there's still the phone. People are trying to connect, right? Colin, you talked about all of those things. Yep. So when they're, they need to have their lists and they can't figure out a way to ask when we got a pandemic, people are out of work, the economy is hard. So Billy, what's the options for these candidates? Because let's face it, like Governor said, he's not hearing from nobody unless it's on social media right now.
I had a hard time asking in a normal environment. It's a very challenging thing in a local community to ask for money. I remember my campaign team in the back holding their hands, 3, 3, 3. And I was like, what does that mean? And they're like, you gotta ask 3 times during the course of your request for ask for money, minus not counting these dial for dollar machines, that you might have at another level. But how you ask for money in a local setting, and now in this COVID environment where we have local businesses folding, shuttered, people not working, I think that's a giant ask. I would focus and maximize my campaign away from money. Because what is the money for? What is the money in a campaign? Yeah, it's for t-shirts and signs and bumper stickers and banners on the side of the road, but it's really for advertisement. The high cost of newspaper and radio, and that's kind of like analogous to, I heard your carpet bombing. You hear this story, that's like a flyover. But the guerrilla warfare, the get on the ground is the knock on doors, and to me, I made a list. The hardest part in this environment campaigning is the free touch. You got to touch, but the graduation parties, right? Don't go over there and act like I'm candidate, take over the party, but go there politely, drop your card and aloha everybody who's there. The canoe races, the sporting events, at church, at all of these functions that are happening. Those are all potential campaign events to touch people. All those events are non-existent. That's got to be really hard for a candidate today.
Okay, so people are having a hard time asking money. So Colin, but isn't that what really matters right now? There's television, right? And for TV, you still need money. So in this climate that you're looking at right now, do you feel, in just your analysis, the person that has the money still rings true? They're ahead of the game?
Actually, I think it's even more important in this environment because you need that money because you can't go, like Mayor Kenoi is saying, and do the free events. The only way to connect to the voters right now is really to pay for electronic communication, those really targeted social media ads that used to not be important and now are essential. And that all requires money. And so if you don't have that, then you really can't get into the game. I mean, and the other thing is, COVID has reduced the amount of time people have to campaign, because we haven't been campaigning so far. And also, and I think we'll get to this a little later into the conversation, our new mail-in balloting system means that people are going to be voting earlier. So you have this really compressed period of time. And I mean, for example, we haven't even seen that many ads. So yeah, I think, unfortunately, I mean, this isn't a good thing. I'm not happy about this, but I think it's hard to deny that money this year is probably more important than ever.
There's an irony here, Donalyn, there's an irony here about money. It's going to be tough to raise money if you're not well known because of the social media and so many people asking. But what it means, particularly after the Citizens United ruling by the right-wing Supreme Court, the people who do have money, the black money PACs, the big organizations that can put together political action committee money, that counts for everything now. If somebody with a lot of, not somebody, if an organization, I call these black money PACs, political action committees, get behind a candidate, they can spend a ton of money on that candidate to make that candidate known. Billy was saying he was making a list. I made a list of the things I had to do to get my first election. The first time I ran and won, it was totally, completely because of touch, because of going to that door, knocking on that door, asking for that consideration, face to face. Who's this long-haired Holly boy from the UH coming and asking for a vote? I didn't even ask for a vote, Billy. I asked for consideration for a vote, and so it worked. But the only way it worked was because of touch. Absent that now, I wouldn't have a prayer of running. I'd have been one of those guys that said to you, "You're right, brother. I'll wait till the next time."
Right. I was going to ask, there is a question that came in from somebody who tuned in. So I just want to get that question out there because Billy, you've been talking local, that, what all the things that you normally would do, knock on doors, do all of that, sign waving, right? No matter what island it is, sign waving is a local thing. How do you feel about that during this time of COVID when we're seeing numbers in flux? They tell you don't gather, right? Usually you see a line of people, right, Governor? You've been a part of that line of people on the corner. So how do you feel about that?
Let me just get to the sign waving. So everybody's got a theory on sign waving, right? I got to the point where if it was raining, I would stop the car and jump out just so people would go, wow, look at that Kenoi kid. Even in the rain, he sign wave. I kept one ready in the back seat, but I would sign wave by myself. They would say, hey, bah, you look weak out there. I kind of feel pity for you. I feel sorry. Like, and if you so the next time I called all my friends and line up the street, blue and white shirts, they go, Billy, you got to pull back. You look like a bully on the side of the road. So I would sign wave by myself in the mornings and with friends and supporters in the afternoons. But to sign waving, the few people I talk to, I encourage them not to sign wave. I said, in COVID environment, people are scared. Everybody, even us trying to, we all worried, how am I going to get my kids to school? How am I going to, get a paycheck tomorrow? What about the mortgage, the rent? So there's this great environment of fear and uncertainty. And I think that, sign waving might turn off some potential voters or potential supporters. So I ask people, do community service with your group instead of sign waving. Go do the letter pickups, go do the community feeding. Just jump in with all the good things going on in a community. Don't make a big deal about yourself right now and your supporters, but get in there, move around and use your team. Instead of an hour like this, an hour of aloha, an hour of sharing, go a whole lot farther than an hour of throwing shakas on the side of the road. That's just my 2 cents.
No, well, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure it out. So that's one thing too, right? Like sticking with COVID, the limited amount of airtime, limited amount of money. Colin, how do people even get beyond talking about their platform and things that they want to do when every top of mind is COVID and the economy? Do the candidates even have a chance to talk about anything else?
They really haven't. And, and I think it's been really frustrating for them even to try to, traditionally the media provides debates and opportunities to get your message out. But I mean, Donalyn, you mentioned this when we started, those Zoom debates, frankly, I think most people think they've been a train wreck. I mean, people talking over each other. It's the sort of thing that I think really turns voters off. I mean, it always seems like kind of politics at their worst. We know people hate the kind of infighting and gamesmanship. And so, I think it's been so tough. And actually, that's what I was going to ask Mayor Kenoi and the governor. They've run a lot of campaigns, and I was going to ask them, well, what should these new candidates been doing? And I love this suggestion about getting out and doing community service. In fact, you've seen some of the candidates on Oahu. I think the ones who are running really smart campaigns, like Keith Amamiya, he's really kind of featured that in some of his ads. But, Governor Abercrombie, you've long been the master of trying to create earned media or free opportunities for exposure. What would you advise, a young person trying to get their name out there? What should they be doing?
I like that smile on his face right now.
I'll give you a little story to play off what Billy said. Then I'll give you a serious. This is both serious though. Speaking of holding signs, I used to have my soapbox, right? Because I'm short. You cannot see you. They can see you. But I'm down in Thomas Square, and all of a sudden a rainstorm comes. A black cloud comes over. Boom! The rain comes down. I'm standing on my soapbox. I cannot get out. I'm soaked instantaneously. I figure, screw it. I'm just going to stay here and keep waving my sign. And so, guy pulls up at the red light, rolls down his hand. He says, "Hey, Abercrombie, don't you know enough to get out of the rain?" And I said, "I'm trying to prove I'm too dumb to steal." And he says to me, "You proved it to me. You got my vote." So that's one way to do it. That's for sure. But what's happening now? And you mentioned the mayor's debate. I don't know how many people saw that. Mayor, you call it a train wreck. I wish they talked about the train or the rail or whatever it is. Not a word. Not a word. Billy, I don't know how it's going up in the Big Island with the mayors up there. But but Billy can tell you, as having an executive in the county, I can tell you, as having been governor, the question and the only question that should be dealt with in terms of the candidates right now is, what are you going to do for revenue and programs? We're talking about saving Fernhurst over here right now to give people a chance in life. We were down there, Nancy and I were down holding signs down at the Capitol the other day in support of them and so on. Let me tell you something, at least, unless you know something I don't know, I have not heard, let alone seen one candidate say one word about what they think they're going to do about getting revenue for the city and county of Honolulu or in any of the other counties or for the state of Hawaii once the federal largesse runs out.
Well, I'm gonna pause on that one because we got a question here with regard to the new blood, right? I think a lot of people are frustrated. You throw in COVID, people are frustrated. Economy, revenue, and at some point, people just don't want to hear from a certain individual for whatever purpose. Do you think, and Colin, do you think that's an advantage for the people who are not politicians or did not have a political career? Or do you think those who had the political career know where to go for revenue, understand the grant process, understand how to maneuver government in the three different levels? You've got your county, your fed, your state. So what do you think? I mean, who stands up?
I think that's a great question, and I've been thinking a lot about this. And I mean, if you take, for example, the Honolulu mayor's race, which is arguably one of the hottest races we have this year. I mean, you can really see that contrast between people who have a lot of government experience, Colleen Hanabusa, Kim Pine, Muvi Hanneman, against kind of new folks like Keith Amamiya and Rick Blangiardi, who come from a business background. I'm kind of curious to see what voters are going to be looking for, because I can see it both ways. I mean, I do think that this is an environment that favors older candidates who have a lot of experience. But when for example, some of the mayoral candidates have been saying, well, you don't want to elect someone who needs training wheels. You want someone who has a lot of experience. And I think the others are saying, well, why would you elect someone who put us here in the first place? Isn't it time for some new ideas? I actually don't know how this is going to break down. I can see voters saying, we want someone, we want a businessman like Rick Blangiardi. We want someone who understands money, who can, put us back on the right track. Or we want someone like you were saying, Donalyn, like Colleen Hanabusa, who can really go after those grants, who understands how to balance city and state finances. I'm not sure how voters are going to decide it, but I think they have a very clear choice in this election, which, is always good, I think, for campaigns. I mean, there's no mistaking, the kind of backgrounds these different candidates have.
Billy, as a former mayor, you know how important it is to navigate. So what are your thoughts?
You know, I wanted to, I agree with Colin all the way. I'm curious how this is going to play out, especially here, right? Does Mayor Kim have a second term merely because there isn't enough time for the other candidates to define themselves, to reach the voters? You know, but the fact is 19 people running kind of indicates some level of discontent. On Oahu, I think there's a dynamic in play that nobody's talking about, but that goes to your dichotomy, Colin, is that, you know, is it with the experience or is it somebody new? But I think with the corruption issue, you know, you've got a prosecutor potentially under federal charges, you've lost a police chief and a senior prosecutor, your corporation counsel is a target letter of the federal government. I mean, you're talking like the entire city administration. So that question that Colin posed, are we going to go with, you know, the experience or the newcomers? I think in a city and county of Honolulu, I would have to tip it to the newcomer. I think people's level of discontent is really high in the city and county, and the real staring at it every day, knowing it's going to run in 2056 doesn't help.
Absolutely. Governor, do you have any closing thoughts on that topic?
The fact is that no one, as I mentioned, is talking about where they're going to get that revenue. I mean, corruption is one thing. There's no money to be corrupted by coming in.
So I'll stop you there then, because we have a question with regard to money. There's actually two questions about COVID. One is, Governor, you talked about all kinds of things coming in. How do you know it's valid, right? There's been talk about, are you secure? If I feel like, oh, Billy Kenoi, that's great, I'm gonna go and support him. How secure do I know that my money is gonna go to Billy Kenoi, or is it gonna go somewhere else? Because we're in a digital world. There's that, so people might be hesitant to don't hit the donate button, right? So then you depend on outside money, big money outside of Hawaii right now. Governor, you talked about that, the black money. Well, there's even more money outside of that. How much is that going to play in this race, in the races right now?
I think I don't know on the neighbor islands, because I'm not sure where the Oahu PACs, particularly some of the labor PACs and some of the other political action committees, I'm not sure how much they're playing on the neighbor islands. But on Oahu, I think that there's one or two really big money political action committees. And if they decide they're going to get behind somebody, they're really going to push hard on television and the various other media that might be available to them. So I think that's one factor there. But regardless of who gets elected, when you have 99% reduction in the major money resource, like in travel and tourism, that hits the neighbor islands, it hits Oahu, it hits everybody. When you have a sinkhole of financial challenge, like you do with the rail on Oahu, then how you're going to get the money, where you're going to get the money, who's going to have to pay it, what happens to property taxes, what happens to general revenue, what happens to programs, that is something that is not being faced by any of the candidates right now. Easy for me to say. I mean, I know what I would do and what I did when I was faced with a deficit when I came in 2010. And Donalyn, you know well, because you were there at that time, that we were going to go to infrastructure. That's one of the things that's going to infrastructure. But at that time, we had the money to be able to pay principal and interest. Now, I don't think that's there. So this is a really, really tough problem.
Well, there was another deficit, right? And let's face it, our voters aren't coming out. Colin, can you talk about that? What do you expect? Because over the last couple of years, the last governor's race, we saw a dip. The voter apathy in Hawaii is unfortunate. However, we're changing the game now with all mail-in ballots. It's July 1. In 20 days, we're going to see those ballots drop. What do you see?
That's right. I mean, this is sort of a grand experiment this year. So this is what I think is going to happen. I mean, this sort of thing has been in the national news too, because a lot of states are going to experiment with mail-in voting because of COVID. And I mean, we know famously that President Trump thinks there's going to be problems, or I think really he thinks it's going to depress Republican turnout. So what do we know about mail-in balloting? How does this affect voter turnout in other states? And the answer seems to be that it increases voter turnout a little bit. So all the studies show between 1 and 3 percentage points, which is pretty good. I mean, that's moving in the right direction. It's not going to be a game changer. We're not going to see a huge increase in turnout this year. I really don't think that's true. And nobody knows how COVID's going to affect this. So I really have nothing to go on there. But I think if you just look at how mail-in voting has changed things, it's about 3 percentage points. But there's something else that the best study that was conducted in Colorado seemed to show, which was that one thing it did is it increased turnout quite a bit from people who don't tend to turn out. So younger voters, people who are a little more disengaged. And the other thing that was pretty encouraging is it increased turnout from more moderate voters. So usually people on the extremes, the left and the right, those folks tend to turn out. But with mail-in voting, because it made it so easy, it increased moderate voter turnout. So it's not going to be a game changer. We're not going to see our voter turnout go from really bad to really great overnight. But I think it's going to help a little bit. And I think we should all be thankful that we decided to do this well before anyone had heard the word COVID-19, because we had the infrastructure in place to get it going. So I'm hopeful. Is it going to make a huge difference? No, but it should probably help a little bit.
Okay, so Mayor Kenoi, if you're going to be running again, what's going through your mind right now if you're thinking, oh my gosh, mail-in ballots only?
I would be like, there's 3 weeks before those mail-in ballots get sent out on July 21st. Right now, that's exactly what I'd be thinking. 21 days before people voting. You got to remember, people are voting when they get their ballots. So I would say, wow, I've got 21 days to voting, but what I would have built with an all mail-in voting is a get out the vote mechanism. That'd be probably the biggest part of my campaign. It's not the canvassing door to door, friend to friend cards, or any of these other parts of your campaign. It's how to get people to trust this system. Now they're saying 3 to 5 days it's got to get mailed by, right? With that, what we saw with Tommy Waters' Supreme Court case is they tried to define when does a ballot count and when is it disqualified. So now they're saying it has to be in the post office by 7 p.m. Not postmarked the day before, so you can mail your ballot the day before, it doesn't count. What they're saying is urban Oahu, 3 days, and rural areas, meaning rural Oahu and neighbor islands, 5 days. So the election is on August 8th, it's August 3rd. I mean, how many people know that? Then we don't have precincts anymore, we have voter assistance centers. So I had a conversation with our county clerk and I go, how many voter assistance centers? Because as we know, the largest demographic of voters are the seniors, and seniors, they like to go pay in cash. They like to show up in person. They don't like drop their ballot. They've been doing this for 60 years, 50 years. They don't like just go stick them in a mailbox, raise the flag. They're not sure about that. So they like take them to a voter assistance center. Like I vote absentee walk-in, right? 3 weeks before. Now, you're going to you got to drop off 2 places. You used to have 120 precincts here, 120 places. Now it's Hilo and Kona, and that's it. Try imagine how big this island. It's the state of Connecticut with 2 places to drop off your ballots. Waimea, Kohala, Kau, Puna. Puna's as large as Hilo and Kona in terms of voters. So if I'm the elections office, I'm running on dry run. Right now, practice. Practice your ballot, shipping, counting, because it's going to be chaos. Results won't be known. Never mind staying up till midnight. I think results won't be known for days because of the late counting with the post office deliveries.
Governor, you ran a statewide race. You heard what Billy was saying in terms of all of those. Let's face it, we've had election issues, right, over the years. So do you do you foresee this a smooth run, or what do you think?
No,
it's historic.
Very simple. We've already had a lesson in this. The Kentucky Democratic primary. Amy McGrath won the Kentucky Democratic primary for U.S. Senate this past Tuesday because she got the early votes. The mail-in votes went out, I don't know, 40 days ago or whatever the number was, 30 days ahead of time. And Senator Booker, the late charging candidate, so-called progressive candidate, got started late, got some support from across the country, social media, all the ability to reach out to people. And he got a late surge, but it wasn't enough to overcome that early mail-in vote. It was close, but he couldn't make it as a result. What I'll be interested in then is again, whoever the big money PACs are, if they're going to pick somebody, they got to pick them over the next 3 weeks, right, Billy? Because that mail-in ballot hits, if there's on 21st, 22nd, if there isn't any big surge behind certain candidates in terms of mail-in and TV and radio and newspaper over the next 3 weeks, it means they're waiting to see what the runoff is going to be. That's what they're waiting for. So I think, and I wouldn't call it chaos. I think it's going to be hold your breath.
Billy, I saw you there kind of like point out. So how long are we holding our breath for?
No, I want to really get going with this. I mean, I'm hanging with the governor.
Bring it on.
And, you know, with Colin, it's just exciting stuff with junkies. We can talk about this nonsense all day and irritate everybody. But that's why I got to practice leaning back and acting, you know, I'm disinterested. But, you know, people who weren't planning ahead, they didn't have the dates time. Your media buy is all off. You know, if your media buy is focused, because you know how they always tell us, you plan from the election day backwards, right? And make sure you hit all your benchmarks and outcomes on the way to election day. But, you know, you get a big media buy in the last of August, say the last week, 3 to 8. You might be too late. You know, people have held their ballots for a couple weeks already. You've got to have your media buys targeted for 3 weeks. And I'm curious to see how that works out for candidates.
So Colin, you know, with regard to, I'm going back to your 3%, possibly more voters. With a lot of rallies taking place, do you think that might increase that at all for us? I mean, we've had some significant rallies despite COVID. People did their best and showed here in Hawaii, at least, a healthy way of rallying. So what do you think with that? I mean, do we have a surge of people just feeling that momentum?
I wish I could say yes. I mean, this is a sort of thing that I really, you know, it's the kind of question I'd love to say, yeah, I think we're going to see a surge in voter turnout, you know, because of people's frustrations with the state of the country, and they're really going to show up and mail in those ballots this year. But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, there's nothing that, you know, me as the political junkie wants to say, yes, that's going to happen. But me as the political scientist, there's really no evidence that we're going to see that. In fact, I'm worried that it's going to be a little low despite mail-in, just because this isn't on people's radar. I mean, if you look at the polling for mayor, for example, I mean, a lot of those folks were well known, and most people say they don't know because they just haven't thought about it. I mean, they're worried about their jobs and paying their bills, and it takes a while for that to start to translate into, oh, well, who should I support, you know, in the election, you know, that might be the best person who's best positioned to guide us through this crisis. It's just not, people don't have that luxury right now. You know, and that makes me sad, but I think we're going to see, I mean, I hope it's going to be what it was, you know, in a comparable election 4 years ago. You know, and that may be buoyed a little bit because of people's excitement around the presidential election. I mean, that always happens a little bit, but I think this COVID crisis, despite mail-in voting, the turnout's going to be low.
Okay, so Governor, this president issue, right? You don't think that's motivating people to get out to vote?
Well, it's going to motivate him in November because whether to get rid of Donald Trump. In terms of motivation, they talk about his base is motivated. Oh, I mean, every day he's working as hard as he can to step on his own message and lose this election. So he's pushing people to get out. There's going to be a big vote there, no doubt about that. But in terms of local races, and probably on Oahu a runoff, and maybe on the Big Island too, Billy. I'm not with 19. There may be a runoff. I don't know. Maybe Harry Kemp can pull it off with so many people running. But what I think is going on is nobody is exciting in that way. In some respects, no offense to anybody who's not on this show, but I really think that if I could run for mayor, or if Billy was running for mayor right now, I think we'd have a good chance to win because of the kind of people that we are. Whatever it is on social media, I'm saying, look, brother, you put me in, I'll be in charge. I will make decisions. I'm going to deal with this situation. These guys, they're all nice people, but let me tell you, nobody's telling you what they're going to do. I'm going to make the hard decisions. They're looking for Frank Fosse. If Frank Fosse was running today, he'd win on a walk. I'm serious about this.
I just wrote that email, what you just said. I just wrote it. I told somebody, hey, you know what? And I told 4 candidates, stop trying to be a nice guy. Stop trying to smile and shock at your waitress. People are scared and uncertain. They're looking for leadership. They want
leadership. If they could find a woman, Billy, if they could find a woman,
how they can handle this.
If they could find a woman that did that, she would win in a walk. And I've told them all, this is not advice I'm keeping to myself. Believe me, I've talked to virtually every single candidate except one.
I wonder who that is.
Because there's no secrets here, and I told everyone, leadership is it. You have to show people. You got to believe, because belief in government is probably as low as it's ever been. And let's face it, in Hawaii, ever since statehood, people have generally believed in government. They thought, hey, people are going to try and do their best for you. They may not have all the talent. They may not be the brightest and all the rest of it. They got good hearts. They're going to try for Hawaii. But the belief is way down there now. Leadership and confidence. If people believe for a second, I have confidence in her, I have confidence in him, they're going to vote for him. I don't see it out there. I do not see it out there. It's nothing against them personally. I'm speaking strictly as an objective political fact. The excitement around leadership and confidence is lacking across the state.
It's everything. We don't want to hear about education. Don't tell me about your plan for attacking climate change. It's just what the governor said. It's leadership and competence.
You know, I always hear so many people tell me that the problem is that the state, elected officials are afraid to make bold decisions anymore. Do you guys think that's true? We don't have enough people who are willing to show that kind of leadership. And why do you think that is? No. You guys have never been afraid of making taking controversial positions or being outspoken.
Hey, it's the old adage.
We paid the price for it too.
We did, but it's
right. It's what you do. Hey, why run? Why run otherwise? But I'll tell you
exactly.
The young candidate.
Wait.
No, wait.
Really,
the young candidate.
Hold on, time out. See, Colin, we got going on this one. Okay. So, but go ahead, Governor. Go ahead.
Yeah. Look, there are some young candidates out there. When I say leadership and confidence, I'm talking about some of the big, but some of the other. There's prosecutors out there. I'll give you Jackie Esser. Now, you may not know a lot, but she's using the social media. She's got supporters out there with huge email lists. They're out there hitting those people. Kimberly Pine is running a very, very good campaign. She's got her signs out there. She has done the homework. The kind of thing Billy was talking about, going and touching and all the rest before COVID hit. She's been working little meetings, Malama o Manoa, the chapter meeting in Manoa. She shows up at those things. People remember that. And there's other candidates. That just comes immediately to mind. She's running a terrific, that's 2 women that are running great campaigns. So Colin, Billy, it may be that we will not, I don't necessarily going to be surprised, but it may be that some of the new candidates who are making maximum use of what is available to them and personally have very, very committed supporters with large email lists, they may come and exercise some surprises.
I agree.
Billy, you were going to say something before. You guys were both getting excited. You want to finish your thought?
Oh, no, I'm okay. No, it was just back to, it's very focused election, and it doesn't take a lot to see what it is voters are looking for. They want somebody to calmly assure them that I will make the difficult decisions, the one nobody else wants to make, because those are the kinds of decisions that will have to be made by the chief executive going forward. You know, and calmly let everybody know we're going to get to the other side. It's going to be a bit bumpy. It's going to be rough, but we'll all get there together. I need your help. You know, I mean, it's got to be that kind of, we're all in this together. You know, let's get to the other side of this, but somebody's got to be accountable. Somebody's got to make the tough decisions. I'm that somebody. You know, I mean, somebody's got to say it like that. I haven't really felt that in the campaigns out there.
Well, okay, so getting back to Hana and policy. So, you know, the tough decisions that are being made. Colin, we have a compressed legislative session going on right here. And so is there leadership taking place? I mean, these issues that, you know, Governor and Mayor have just brought up, let's not forget, yeah, there's this campaign season, but there's also a legislative session happening right now. So does that exist, this leadership that they're talking about?
You know, this has been a really interesting period. I mean, to watch how the legislature has handled this. I mean, because the leadership has not come from the governor. I mean, I think that's sort of a universally held opinion, not just my opinion. You know, the Governor Ige has certain strengths, but I don't think communication is among them. And so different people have stepped in to fill that vacuum. I mean, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, I think, is probably the most visible there, and he's been rewarded by that with tremendous public support now. But the other thing you've seen, and in some ways this is a positive development, I mean, the leadership in the legislature has really taken a much more visible role. You've heard a lot from Speaker Saiki. And, you know, a lot of people, of course, might disagree with this decision to fund, for example, public employee raises. But usually in a crisis like this, the leadership comes from the executive. And right now you're seeing really, I think, a lot of the leadership and a lot of the communication come from the leadership of the legislature. So I'm really curious to see, you know, as this session continues, how they're able to, you know, continue communicating what actually comes out of this. And also if we, you know, does Governor Ige have a second act? Is he going to sort of reemerge as I think the leader of the state needs right now, and you know, hasn't, for a variety of reasons, I think, you know, been effective at communication during this crisis. But you know, I'd be really curious to hear, for example, what Governor Abercrombie or Mayor Kenoi have, because they've actually been in these executive positions.
Okay. I think Mayor Kawakami deserves some credit as well.
Yeah,
I was going to say, Mayor Kawakami is there's two people in the state right now that everybody recognizes as showing a leadership and ability to make decisions. That's Mayor Kawakami and Josh Green. I think, Billy, yeah, I think there's no question about that. And as far as legislatures, county councils are legislators too. In the city and county of Honolulu, you're not only going to have a new mayor, you're going to have a brand new a majority council being elected at the same time. And that starts the next year's budget, the next 2 years' budget. And this legislature, Colin, is dealing just with this year's late budget that hasn't been finished. The second the election is over, they got to start the next 2 years' budget with revenues just disappearing. So the contest for governor begins the first Wednesday in November. I'll tell you, that's for sure.
Governor, me and you had the Great Recession. You know, we had to come in. I remember I had to cut the budget for consecutive years. This never happened. But, you know, I remember talking to old timers, Richard Henderson, you know, Bobby Fujimoto, you know, guys who saw their businesses wiped out in 46 and 60. And they said the Great Recession was the worst they ever saw.
Yeah.
And so you're talking, you know, smart businessmen, been around 80 years. Now you talk about what facing the leaders in the next 2 to 3 years. Nobody's prepared for that, I think.
Right.
I think it's, I don't care how talented you are, how gifted you are, or what kind of coalition and leadership team you bring in together. It'll be challenging for the best of them. And like the governor was alluding to earlier, you know, who has the financial plan to stabilize the economy? Because without sound fiscal policy, you'll never have good public policy. First and foremost, you got to balance the books. And you cannot raise taxes to pay for things in an environment where people aren't working and can't make their rent or their mortgage. You're going to ask for more from them. You know, so we're going to see reductions. We're going to see difficult decisions made by everybody. Public worker unions, some concessions going to have to be made. There's no easy way out of this. And so the next whoever's wins this election, they've got a lot of work ahead of them. But
there's an easy way out of this. So yeah, how far do you take this, right? With regard to legislative policies right now, Colin, you said it's really up to the executive. So what's the top issue with regard to this? You know, there's the health issue, but then there's what Billy just said. You gotta balance the books. So where does this leave everyone else with regard to these policies? You see leaders stepping up in communities for food security, trying to figure that out. Let's not forget all of those goals that were set by the state with regard to food, agriculture, and energy. And now we have COVID. So where do all of those things play in the mix?
It's going to be an incredibly challenging time. I mean, I think one of the thing that we're going to have to struggle with first is how we start bringing the economy back online and keeping people safe. I mean, that is an incredible tension in a state that still, whether we like it or not, relies on tourism. And you can't have tourism right now, and people are deeply fearful. There's a poll my center's doing right now, and we'll release the results next week. But I mean, one of the things I was really struck by that is how resistant people are to really starting back tourism in any way. And the only way to do that is to come up with a plan, and you know, the COVID testing seems to be part of that, to keep people safe, to restart our economy. Without that, it's just going to be a slow burn as we have less and less money and we're forced to cut more and more programs. And these ambitious goals we had for, like you mentioned, for energy, for agriculture, we can't do any of that. So we're in a tough spot. And the only way to get out of this, I think, is to come up with a strategy to restart our economy. And, you know, you've heard people talk about the Kama'aina economy, and we're going to get our you know, and to some extent that's been a little bit successful. We have, you know, and I think it's important to recognize this, we have the lowest per capita rate of COVID infection of any state in the country. So that's a real victory. But we've also got to restart our economy. And so how do you balance restarting tourism a little bit and keeping people safe? And that's where this trust in government and strong communication from the top, it needs to come into play, because that's essential. And everything else, I mean, really, it's not relevant right now.
No, it's not. And with regard to promises, right, the things that are relevant, what you guys talked about, economy. So I'm going to pose this question that's come in for governor and mayor. Would you have agreed to public sector raises? If you're in this seat, do you say, what do you do? Governor Neal.
Well, you saw what happened in 2010 when we had, as Billy mentioned, the recession. I came in as governor in the wake of the worst depression since the Great Depression, the Great Recession. We came in, we had $250 million deficit just for that year. There was no balance of any books. That was a ballet with the books that was going on. And 4 years later, we came out with a $1 billion plus surplus, which we've been spending down ever since. And the way that was happening, there's no magic to it. We did infrastructure, and we took advantage of the low interest rates, and we need to do that again. So if I came in right now, if I was running right now, that's what I would be running on, and letting people know about putting people back to work and getting money into the economy. That's one start. The problem with that right now is that the income, the revenue coming in to pay the principal and interest on a gigantic infrastructure program is lacking. You've got to find people that will infuse dollars into it. I've got some proposals that I'm talking to the legislature about, talking to the various counties about, talking to the public unions about it. They're going to have to come up with some sacrifices. I said that in 2010, and as I said to Billy and you folks a little while, I paid a price for that. People didn't want to hear it. You take things like the Medicare Part B payments that public workers, retirees get reimbursed to them 100 cents on the dollar. People said to me, "Why'd you bring it up? Nobody knows about it. That's our Vegas money." Well, I don't know how many people are going to Vegas anymore, and I don't know how we can keep on affording that for public employees. I said it's going to hurt the young public employees. So yes, everybody's got to make a sacrifice across, and we'll all get there together if we all stick together. If we're going to put public employees against private employees, if the Chamber of Commerce comes out again, the one thing I've heard from the Chamber of Commerce, for example, is don't raise the minimum wage. They want breaks for everything. PPP, they'll take that money, they take all the money, but for God's sake, don't make sure that the hardest working people with the lowest pay don't get a nickel. That's the kind of thinking that you got going right now. I better be careful or somebody's going to think I'm going to be a write-in candidate. But that you get started with the infrastructure, and then you put everybody in the room and say everybody's got to make a sacrifice, including the public unions, if only to try and salvage the unfunded liabilities that we have for healthcare and for pensions and so on there, and to put people to work with infrastructure right now.
Okay, so Billy, would you have agreed to the raises?
No, I would not have agreed to the. I don't know the decision making and rationale, but you got to look at what's coming up. Like when I came in 2009, we had to work out the first agreements for furloughs. I mean, never before had public sector workers furloughed. I furloughed my staff the first year, just knowing what was coming up. I furloughed, everybody's looking at me like, wow, we just came in. How come we all getting furloughed? I said, management furlough first. There's no way we're going forward without furloughs. People said, oh, you crazy. I mean, you've got to sit down with public workers. Like the governor said, we're all in this together. I've used this before, but it's Dr. Martin Luther King said, hey, we all got here in different boats, but we all in the same ship now. And right now, we ain't going anywhere unless we do it together. And there's two ways to do it. One is you gotta get public worker concessions because it's the largest area of cost of government. You cannot cut the police and fire. You cannot cut the airports and the harbors. I mean, there's certain areas of government that have to function to not diminish the quality of life. And how you restart the economy, you use your borrowing capacity, as the governor said, to build the infrastructure projects, not pet projects, not bridges to nowhere, but the most badly needed projects that have been deferred. You do that. Those are your two steps out. But you cannot be making commitments and promises that are going to put you in a more perilous economic situation when we're using words like catastrophic, unprecedented, never happened in our lifetime. Last time, maybe the 1918 pandemic. So I think, we haven't seen the worst of it. And I do want to give, he's no big fan, and Colin said, lacking leadership. But I got to say this, Governor Ige, standing up to the economic power of tourism and holding off airplanes and hotels. Can you imagine how much pressure the governor knows when guys come in to twist? You're talking about the largest employer in the state. My wife worked Hawaiian, shut down month after month. They're talking 50% reduction at some point. The courage it took to keep our state safe. But now comes, how do we open back up safely while building our economy? Aloha Aina declarations. I think we should take advantage of this opportunity to start to begin to implement transformative economic change. We've been saying this since the 60s and 70s, for the last 40, 50 years. It can't be military tourism, We got to diversify the economy. We only got agriculture. We've been saying this ad nauseum, leaders, all of us, for decades, but now we might not have a choice. And this is a great opportunity. We saw how many vehicles were parked at Aloha Stadium in tourism. Why we were chasing these crazy numbers. We were up to 10 million visitors a year. Really? Is that what we want? Just number of visitors, length of stay? The quality of life in this last few months on every island, in spite of the fear and uncertainty, has been so peaceful and quiet and special. And I think as we move forward, we shouldn't get in a hurry just to get numbers and jobs, but we should take this opportunity to be very strategic and transform our economy in a once-in-a-generational move out of necessity. I think that's how we move forward.
I think you raised a lot of good points. But I will say that for dozens of families, this has not been a peaceful situation.
No.
They are in lines waiting to get just a basket of food. So, Colin, where do we go from there? I mean, things that Mayor just said, you hear it. I mean, you can go back to the book from Ariyoshi. Why aren't they taking that off the shelf? Like Billy said, this isn't anything new to rethink how we're going to move our economy away or diversify the economy away from tourism. So what's the holdup for Hawaii in your perspective?
Donalyn, let me make a comment about Colin right now, because I'm glad you're referring to Colin, because he's exactly the person to go to. You know, the one resource we haven't mentioned today, shame on me, for sure, because when I said to go to infrastructure, and yes, and we all in this together, we need to utilize the incredible resource of the University of Hawaii and the talented faculty that is at the University of Hawaii, which includes Professor Colin Moore, right there, and Perkinson and Sumner Lacroix and other people at the university who have presented right now. It doesn't have to go to a shelf. Right now, they've put forward a detailed economic recovery plan. There is an agriculture plan that's out there. I think this program is going to be closed up by Denise Conan, one of the deans at the University of Hawaii. Right now, if we take what Colin and the other faculty members in economics and agriculture and geography and botany and all the other resources that we have at the university, we can come back on the basis of what Billy was talking about. If we do it together, if we do it in terms of pumping money into our economy, and if we utilize the brain power and the intellectual resources that we have at the University of Hawaii, we can do it. Now that I'm going to shift it to Colin, because you should speak about your plan and answer Donalyn's question, Colin.
Well, sure. Thanks for that, Governor. You know, I obviously agree. I think UH is a great resource. But Donalyn's right. I mean, you can, in my office here, you have stacks of old plans about how to diversify Hawaii's economy. It's never for a lack of ideas, but you know, the idea that has really been gaining traction recently around tourism, because let's face it, whether you love tourism or not, it's going to be a key industry here, probably forever. But I think what more people have been talking about now is how to make this work better for us. I mean, I think we've really, we haven't been generating the sort of revenue we need to off tourism for a long time. And the best idea I've heard, which actually a lot of the mayoral candidates have been talking about, is this idea of a green fee. Basically, simply, you charge more for the attractions. You charge way more for things like going up Diamond Head or visiting beaches. And it can be difficult to figure out how you structure that. But a lot of tourism places in Europe and in Asia have these sorts of green fees. And some of that money goes to pay for basic budget programs, maybe for education, and some of it goes back to pay for the environmental impact of tourism. But this has been, frankly, it's been too cheap of a destination. And so I think what we want, I mean, because this is a resource we have, we want to generate more revenue from each one of those tourists. And I think most of the studies indicate that you can charge more, people would pay it. And so if we got to keep tourism, we need to be generating more revenue from tourism. And this green fee idea, I think, is one of the more promising things I've heard.
Okay, so Billy, what do you think of that? Because, you know, one of the things, it was brought up earlier about Fernhurst, but I mean, partnerships, right? When you were a mayor, is that part of the mix with this outlook of better leveraging partnerships with the private and nonprofit sectors to provide services, honestly, that we need? I mean, if we take homeless, for example, right? I'm sure, Colin, you're addressing that in your research and your study, but that's a situation as well. We can go down the line of all the issues that we're facing, county and state. So where do you go with partnerships for that? Partnerships with nonprofits who are now suffering.
You know, we've been through the suffering. You know, I know how it feels to lead when times are tough, and there's no other way. And you know, back to the beginning of the point of this is campaigning. And I remind everybody, and when you campaign with aloha. You know, don't be out there whispering and trying to be sly and talk stink and make pilau, because this is Hawaii and we all know who make pilau and we all know what you said. You know, and once you do that, You try to get to the cooperation and collaboration, it doesn't happen. Who wants to work with you? And not just the candidate now, we're talking their friends, their cousins, their auntie, uncles. Nah, you peel out. And so leaders who aren't careful during a campaign find it challenging to govern because it's harder to bring together cooperation and collaboration. But to talk about the economy, tourism is vital and necessary. Who are we kidding? But we get too used to it and want more of it. And the hotel room tax becomes real. Now it's this, now it's the counties and the state every year. And it becomes just this fight over more, instead of stop. And this is what COVID did. You know, yes, it's challenging. It's tough for everybody. But at the same time, look at the level of people out there feeding each other, reaching deep in their pockets, taking care of the neighbors, making packets for kupunas, making sure children are healthy and safe. But without cooperation, collaboration, and collective effort, I think any policy will be challenging to implement. We got to remember our reaching to Washington, D.C. is not the same as having the governor up there as a congressman or the Senator Inouye, Senator Akaka. You know, we had a different team back then, at the state level. So, but I'm still optimistic. I'm still encouraged going forward. And I think, like Governor said, the University of Hawaii Hilo, the community college system, there's a lot of smart people in our community.
We're getting close to that. And so there's a lot of smart people in our community, absolutely. Leaders who are doing great things. So why is it, Governor, that we only have one candidate for CD2?
You mean the candidate that I supported early because I thought he would do great, but because Ben Cayetano, John Wahehe, and I, well, of course, I've known Kai Kahele since he was a baby, and his dad, Billy Kenoi can say this. You want to talk about a candidate coming up who is local in origin and global in outlook because of the aloha that he was raised in and the atmosphere of island values that took place when he.
I'm a big believer in Kai Kahele. If we go in this, but to the governor's credit, if you look at Kai just as a candidate, and the background he brings to the table, I'm sure that
Billy, he showed. You talk about leadership. Don't forget, Tulsi Gabbard was riding high when Kai Kahele jumped in the race. A lot of people didn't jump in the race, Donalyn, because they didn't have the guts. They didn't have the moxie. They didn't have the ambition to be able to go make the jump. He did. And so he got in there and pitched, and all of a sudden, things changed. COVID came. The Tulsi decided to run for president, and all of a sudden he was moving. He had the momentum, and he kept on going. Put good people around him, and Cayetano and Wahehe and Abercrombie didn't hurt him too bad.
Well, I just have to throw that question out there because Billy, we've talked about the leadership here.
I find out about this and find out the governor talked, and I never jumped in, so I had to jump in.
But I want to pass it back to Colin just really quickly because they talk about what's going to happen federally. Having that strong delegation means so much for us in the Pacific. They both know it. So how is that going to change the landscape for us in DC? Will it?
Well, if you mean if Kai gets elected, or if
ultimately what's gonna happen for Hawaii with regard to that? Because again, there's those three levels, and we may run out of time for that, which we could pitch it to another case. But there's one last question.
Well,
before I you like that question, huh?
No, but it's important.
Yeah.
So we're here today because of Dan Inouye. Right? I can speak authoritatively on that because of being a part of his team. We had a small team. He was the captain, well, more than the captain. He was the supreme captain of our team and one of the captains in the United States Senate. Seniority is everything, especially when it's combined with talent and drive and intelligence the way Senator Inouye possessed it. But we have that opportunity again right now. The Senator Kenoi utilized the Appropriations Committee as the launching pad for the great success that he had during his career. And our good fortune is that Senator Schatz now is on the Appropriations Committee, rising very quickly in that. If we get the, and this is a practical answer, I mean, an answer that has practical import for Hawaii, Donalyn. If we win the United States Senate, if we get rid of Mitch McConnell and the Republican majority, Senator Schatz will be the chairman of the Military Construction Subcommittee of the Defense Committee and the Appropriations Committee right now, let alone what might happen should he be reelected in time to come. So I think we're in a good spot there. Senator Hirono is in an excellent spot in terms of the Armed Services Committee and other committees that have a effect on Hawaii's economy. Ed Case is a master at inside politics in the House of Representatives, and again on appropriations. I mean, we're very solidly set. And if Kai comes in there, I think he's got the kind of talent, the kind of personality that will be most welcome in the Democratic majority in the House of Representatives. So I think from the federal point of view, we're in very, very good shape right now with an integrated team that has for our little tiny state, 5,000 miles away, literally from Washington. I think we're in the process of putting another team together that will honor the legacy that Senator Kenoi created for those of us who had the privilege and honor of serving with him.
Well, I think, those are really great words to pass it on to Dean Coney, because that's why we're here. Governor, you talked about the University of Hawaii Policy Center and DKI Institute. So Dean, I'm going to pass it over to you now for closing words. And we want to thank everybody for tuning in. I think I could get through most of those questions, but if there's any question that you're dying, please, I'll look out for you. Go ahead and type that into the chat room, but passing it over to you, Denise Conan.
Thank you, Donalyn. Well, aloha. I really thank all of the panelists for taking the time today. Governor Abercrombie, Mayor Kenoi, and Colin Moore. This has been such an inspiring and exciting dialogue around such important topics. We're at such a pivotal time in Hawaii's history. We know that policy is going to be important. How we choose leadership in this next realm is so much in the air. And so having insights like this, it's just an important dialogue for us to be having. Jennifer and I talked about how the university could come together and play a larger role, play a constructive role at a time like this. And just how do we do that? How do we get out there? This idea of having a webinar is part of that effort for the university to bring our leadership, but also to engage with leaders, thought leaders in our community in a constructive way. I've been just so proud to work with the Daniel K. Inouye Institute team, Jennifer, Jill, Sarah, and others, and to be bringing opportunities like this to our community. It's great. I'm so glad to see so many participants here today asking questions, getting engaged in this topic, and we hope to be bringing more forward to you. Colin, especially, I thank you on behalf of the Public Policy Center and the work that you're doing there. It's so great. Governor, you really appreciate so much your support for University of Hawaii and all that we're doing. Donalyn, thank you again. Thank you for everything. So with that, let me just close and thank everyone for taking the time this afternoon at this Pau Hana event to focus on such important issues. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Billy. Mahalo, Governor.
Oh, yeah, hey.
Mahalo, Colin.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Governor.
Governor.
And for those who are still tuned in, again, we ran out of time, but I think we covered a lot of interesting topics. Thank you for your feedback. And it's good to have Mayor Kenoi giving us his mana'o as well. So that was great. Okay, have a good evening, everyone.